Hello, everyone, and a very good morning to all of you. Distinguished delegates, presenters, and participants from SAARC member states and other regions around the globe. Ladies and gentlemen, I am very thankful to all of you for joining us in the webinar on promotion of light electric vehicles in SAARC. My name is Muhammad Umar Mukhtar, and I am working at SAARC Energy Center as Research Fellow Energy, Transport, and Environment. I shall be moderating today's SARC webinar, the aim of which is to highlight and promote the numerous benefits that the use of light electric vehicles brings to the common consumer and the governments, and disseminate the information among the policymakers, regulators, researchers, academia members, and other stakeholders from the SARC member states. Let me give you a brief background of why are we organizing this webinar. So basically, the two-wheelers, we all know that they provide accessibility benefits over cars and public transport. Especially in dense cities in Asia and Europe, bicycles and motorcycles are more affordable, flexible, reliable, and often faster than cars. In addition to reduced space required for parking, motorcycles also use 3.5 times less space than cars. So two-wheelers are much more space efficient than other private vehicles, even when considering a slightly higher average occupancy rate for cars. The environmental benefits are substantial as well. For example, when it comes to climate change, air quality, and noise. Compared to conventional motorcycles, electric two-wheelers emit substantially less CO2 emissions per kilometer on a life cycle basis, even when powered by coal-based electricity. Indeed, over 80% of the 29 million tons of CO2 savings in 2017 by all types of electric vehicles globally are due to electric bikes in China alone. However, two-wheelers, including electric two-wheelers, suffer from a bad reputation and a lack of attention from policymakers in many countries. Other than China, e-bikes and electric scooters are still in an early stage of adoption. So through this webinar, we would like to discuss some of these issues. The participants of today's webinar are from relevant government departments, research organizations, academia, associated industry, and private sectors, specifically from South Asia. I'm also extremely grateful to our esteemed panel of presenters. We are joined today by Mr. Sudasatha Kundu from India Smart Grid Forum, Mr. Hemal Thakkar from CRISIL Research India, and Mr. Avinesh Neogi from CRISIL Research India as well. I thank all of you for your enthusiasm and willingness to participate in our webinar. So with this short introduction of the aims and objectives of the webinar, I would like to move towards our first presenter. Our first expert, Mr. Sudasatha Kundu, is currently working as Senior Manager Technical Advisory in India Smart Grid Forum and has an experience of more than 10 years in energy sector. He is an electrical engineer and an MBA in power management. He has worked with various power and transport utilities, multilateral and bilateral agencies across South Asia and Southeast Asia, for example, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Laos, Indonesia, etc., on development of EV implementation roadmaps, EV charging business models, smart grid roadmaps, policy and regulatory assessments, energy security, cross-border power trading, etc., and also co-authored various publications on EV and charging infrastructure, smart metering, and hydropower development. Mr. Kundu will be giving a presentation on charging strategy and implementation of electric vehicles. So, Mr. Kundu, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. This is Sudasatha Kundu. I'm working with India Smart Grid Forum. I'm mainly working on the electric vehicle and smart grid domain. Today, the topic before me is the light electric vehicle charging strategy and implementation. Although it's a light electric vehicle, but I will majorly focusing on this charging station implementation, because at some point of time, I think the charging stations will be needed by this light electric vehicle also, because you cannot go on and put charging stations or chargers in your home, because due to some constraint, which I'll be explaining in my slides. Now, one of the major questions, first I will introduce about ISGF. ISGF is a public-private partnership of initiative of Ministry of Power, Government of India, and responsible for accelerated development of smart grid technologies in Indian power sector. 200 plus members and evolved as a think tank of global repute. We work on various projects on electric mobility. Starting from we have helped West Bengal Transport Corporation in deployment of 80 electric buses, which is successfully operating currently in Kolkata city. And we have also helped them in procurement of another 150 electric buses under the FAME 2. And other various projects that we are doing, I will explain that. This is the key projects that we are doing on electric mobility. Like we are also planning the electric vehicle charging infrastructure in Bangalore city, where we are mainly carrying out this load flow studies to select the ideal locations for charging stations. The reasons I will also mention in the next slides. The study of infrastructure and enabling environment for road electric transport in SAARC member state, which I did with Mr. Umar. This implementation roadmap for electrification of public transportation in Kolkata. Then conducting a feasibility study on introducing electric vehicle in Indian Sundarbans. Here we did actually on the electric rickshaws, because there are some various engine vans are running, which are really polluting, and they're not efficient also. So we did a feasibility study on both the technical and financial feasibility on how to convert them into electric vehicle or e-rickshaws. The preparation of RFP and operator agreement for WBTC, that is West Bengal Transport, for procurement of electric buses. Study of smart grid and electric vehicle market scenario in India. Electric vehicle, these are some of the white papers that we published. The electric vehicle charging station business models for India. Study report on electric vehicle policies and electric tariff for EV charging in India. Going to this charging infrastructure for the light electric vehicle, first the point is that it's one of the questions that always comes to everyone's mind, whether it should be the EV first or it should be the charging infrastructure. Now for the EV, if you see, some people are saying that EV should come first, but at some point of time, if you just try to link this EV and charging infrastructure, you can get also convinced that the charging infrastructure should come first, because EVs will come, then how the charging infrastructure, without the charging infrastructure, how EVs can get into that, because there are various push factors for promoting the charging infrastructure taken by the government, and various like the the tariff structure that should be there, this land availability, this grid connectivity, and there are, if you suppose you were saying that the EV should come first and there should not be charging infrastructure, then there will be a problem of range anxiety, because when you are going for the long range driving, then how you will charge your vehicle and all other. Now with the charging infrastructure development is a necessity for the EVs to come up. There are the few of the key drivers that we're doing. One is the policy and standards, because policy and standards also facilitate charging infrastructure in the way like Government of India is currently doing. A DHI is given out 2636 charging stations actually in some of these 60 or 62 cities in India on subsidy basis. Now in policy and standards, various states have come up with policy and standards for the EV, and where you can see that there are various rebates on the capex and opex are giving on the charging stations. Now the EV penetration, which is another key driver for charging station, because if we don't have an EV or we have not sufficient EVs running in a city, then or in area, then you cannot put the charging infrastructure, because the return on investment will be very minimal for that. That I will show you. That is another is the location, because the location, you can say that the land availability is a necessity. At what price you are getting the land, that is a necessity. Second is the grid upgradation scenario, because in many major cities, digging due to for this cabling of LT lines and others, it means it incurs huge charges. Suppose in Mumbai, it runs to crores of rupees if you're digging some other 1 kilometer, municipal charges and all. Now the grid upgradation is also required, because location is linked to grid upgradation, because in some of the locations, the transformer that is there, they might be having a what is called spare capacity in there at some point of time in day, so that point of time you can use the transformer capacity to charge your EVs. And so that, because if you don't have a transformer capacity, then you need to put a new transformer, you need to put a 33 by 11 kV line if you are going for a more than 50 kilowatt charging stations. Your charging stations, when the charging station include more than 50 kilowatt charger, you need to, because then you are going for the LT to ST, then you have a ST line needed. Then there is the battery characteristics of EV, because the charging stations also take into account the various vehicles that are running in that city, because if you have a smaller battery capacity, if you are running if the they're the trip with the two-wheelers are of very long range, then there will be needed of more charging stations, because they, in a city, a four-wheeler may come up with a what is called 20 kilowatt or a 70 kilowatt battery like Daytona, and they can go up to 400 kilometers. So it needs not to be charged daily. But if you come up with a two-wheeler, it may be need to be charged daily. And the charging time, that the charging time, how much charging time, that also depend on the battery characteristic of EV, because EVs batteries have a charge rate, specified charge rate. Like currently, most of the batteries are coming with a C or C/2 charge rate. So if you have, suppose if 30 kilowatt battery is there, if you have a if you have a battery with a C charge rate, then you can charge in 1 hour this 30 kilo, and your battery is 30 kilowatt hour and the charger is 30 kilowatt, then in 1 hour you can charge that battery. In C/2 it will take 2 hours, but if you have a 2C, then it will take half an hour. So that charging time also is one of the factor. Then charging tariff. In India, some of the states have already waived the B1 charges for the charging tariff, and also specified some of the what do you call this reduced energy charge for the EV charging. So that charging tariff is also one of the key factors. Then there is a service fee. Suppose the charging station operator is there, he need to charge you a service fee for the charge for the charging, for providing the charging to the EVs. Now that service fee also need to be decided. In India, there is something, there is a like for the tariff also in India, there is a MOP guideline, Ministry of Power guideline, that the DISCOMs cannot charge more than 15% of the average power purchase cost. For the service fee, although there is no cap, but it need to be decided by the state nodal agencies for the charging stations, which will be implemented through government incentive. So that also put a cap on this service fee for the uh, operator, and that can hamper the ROI, return on investment on that. So this all links to the revenue of the charging stations if you are implementing on charging stations. Now going to the next slide, this some of the government initiatives in India has taken. That is 2636 charging stations, which I was talking about. Department of Heavy Industries has given selected some of the parties for this implementation of 2636 charging stations and provided subsidy for that in 62 cities. 15 states have EV policies right now, including the draft one also, and more than 13 states have special tariff for EV charging. Like recently, Rajasthan has come up with the draft. The state of Rajasthan in India has come out with a draft which suggests that there will be 6 rupees per unit will be the tariff for this charging of EVs, and that is the specified demand charge for the HT and LT consumer. Like although these two-wheelers might be mostly going for the LT consumers, there is a specification of charging stations, and according to Indian norms, any above 50 kilowatt it goes to HT, and below 50 kilowatt it goes to LT. And these are the slow and the fast chargers. You can see that this, what you call this, 50 kilowatt rating of these charging stations are also being given. The chargers are also being given, and charging vehicle type is also being given. So if you can see for the two-wheelers, you can easily see that the Bharat AC 001, Bharat DC 001, or this is slow or moderate charger, they are using for two-wheelers and three-wheelers, light electric vehicles. And in the fast also, you can use the Type 2 AC. So if you get 22 kilowatt and 15 kilowatt, if you put one fast and the one slow charger, out of these options, you can go with the most of the LT connections, and accordingly your tariff and everything will be charged from it. So the various other incentive initiatives that is taken by government of India is the charging stations at every 100 kilometer on each side of highways. So that is the fast charging stations at every 100 kilometer on each side of highways, and one charging stations at every 25 kilometer on each side of highways. So that one of that initiative that will promote the implementation of charging stations along the highways for the cars actually, and also the two-wheelers if they, some of the bikers, they want to go for a long run. Then this 20% parking space for EV charging. That's most of the residential complex that are now being built. There is a 20% of space is being kept for the EV charging stations, that you can implement the EV charging stations there. Now the thing with the light electric vehicle, many of the people came up with a thought that the light electric vehicles have their own chargers, the small chargers, and they can charge in the buildings also. Now when you are now most of the buildings that are coming up are the residential complexes and others. Suppose you are staying in a third floor or a fourth floor or a fifth floor. Every floor you cannot put a charger and you can charge there, right? You have to charge in the basement only. Now when you are putting a charger in the basement, how many chargers you can put? Right, first question. Second question is that how many chargers, like you are a single phase connection. Now if you want to buy a bike or scooter, and if you have a more than if you have in your family there are 2 or 3 scooters, then you have to increase your connectivity load, and then it goes beyond this single phase to 3-phase connection. Now, if so much 3-phase connection, so many 3-phase connections are being connected, then there may be a phase imbalance, right? In one of the phase. If so many chargers are connected in one of the phase, then there may be phase imbalance that need to be looked after by the discoms and utilities that are providing. So instead of that, we can go for the charging stations. Now, charging infrastructure or charging stations that is being built in the place with 2 or 3 fast chargers for cars also, and for light electric vehicles also, and slow chargers for light electric vehicles like a petrol pump with diesel and petrol. That can give you a more opportunity for these 2-wheelers and 3-wheelers to charge when they're coming in. So instead of going to home, suppose you are going to office, there also need to be charged. So you cannot put everywhere as individual charger and charge your light electric vehicle or 2-wheeler or 3-wheeler, or even cars also. So then there is a need for the charging stations that need to be implemented. Also, obviously, there is another option for the battery swapping that has been coming up. And the battery swapping needs, one of the things is that the interoperability. You are putting a battery in every car and every light electric vehicle is coming, you have to put the same battery in that. You cannot identify a particular battery for a particular setup of a particular model of that. So these are some of the that is the concept of interoperability. So these are some of the hindrances that may be coming for the battery swapping. So there are various options that are coming up. So but charging stations will be one of the key factors for keep the EV movement going. And without this, it will not be it will be a very big problem for the EV owners to get charged in the long run or in the short run. Now I have prepared one of the charging infrastructure based on the Indian scenario. This is one of the calculation, just a rough calculation, and some of the values may vary, but instead, suppose the Bharat AC charger, type 2 AC charger we're taking, suppose you are having a charging station and these 4 chargers are you are planning to keep. So now if you're putting as a service operator or a charging station owner, if you're putting these 4 chargers, then the cost is being given. Now with suppose you are putting this 1 CHAdeMO, 1 CCS2, type 1 type 2 AC and 3 Bharat AC 001 chargers. So maximum power sold to EVs per day, kilowatt hour, because you can see the 3.3, it's 9.8, and if we are taking that per day 20 hours per day, we have assumed that, and that for that kilowatt hour will be like this. So for suppose 2638 or 2600 kilowatt hour per day, we're taking it. Now if you need a new electricity connection, because if you calculate the total load, it is coming around 200. So putting a new transformer 200 kVA if your existing transformer doesn't have that capacity. Now new electricity connection, now LT cabling, 100 meters, the panels, the breakers, and another cost of 33 by 11 kV line, which I have not included here. So land cost also we have not included. So it's mentioned in the below that land cost not included. Then you have civil works, the flooding brands, painting, shade or cover, then EVSE management, software integration with the chargers, CCTV camera system. The total capex maximum electricity sold per day is this. Now the OPEX annual, if you take the technicians, the service and storage fee per year, then the EVSE management software fee that needs to be, you need to subscribe to one of the EV management software from where you are procuring that, and that per year. Then you will also have this payment gateway fee. Now consider the pass through to the consumer. Now if your payment gateway fee like Paytm or others, Paytm or this Amazon Pay and others, if you have, then you can payment gateway fee can be passed to the consumer, which will increase the tariff to a certain extent. Then the advertising that the rate of 5,000 per month, because it will be proper retail business. Charging is a proper retail business type thing. Although in India this is exempted from this what is called as a resale, and also it's taken as a service, but it will need to act as a retail service to promote its charging station like the petrol pumps and others, so that more and more cars comes and come and charge their EVs. Now the total OPEX is coming down 3,80,000. Now if you calculate, now see we are based on this penetration of the EV and the reduction in the battery cost and the target of the government, we have taken certain capacity utilization factor based on the penetration of EV. Like first year we are taking 20% CUF, means this consumption that is there, we're taking it such that 20% per year, 20% CUF, I mean 20% capacity of the total charging stations will be utilized. Now, if you did then total kilowatt hour that can be sold at different CUFs, capacity utilization factor, in each year, you see this year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, and year 5, this amount of energy will be sold. So total annual revenue, if you're taking as a rupees 4.5 per kilo, I'm taking as one of the lowest fee in India for this EV charging. This is the annual revenue is this, because here we'll be figuring out the ROI, not the ROI actually, but the net margin of the operator. So we're taking the lowest fee that he need to pay to the DISCOM. So at the rate of 4.5 kilowatt hour, you can see this is the annual revenue that they will get from there, from selling the electricity for charging. Now, scenario one, the margin 30% on electricity tariff. This margin is the service fee. Now, we are taking two scenarios. One is the service, one is 30% on electricity tariff. Suppose you are 4.5, we'll increase 30% on that as a service fee. And scenario two, we will be increasing 50% on that electricity tariff as service fee. Now, if you see that there's annual OPEX from the previous slide, if you see there is a 3,80,000 of the annual OPEX, the net margin that is coming up in the first year it is coming negative. From the second year it started becoming positive. In the 50% case, from the first year it's becoming positive. But this is only the OPEX, and that what is being means your expense per year, and what is your this your margin per year. So if you are getting that positive, then you have the capex cost to cover to get the payback period, and which will be very high in that case. So there are various business models that need to be thought into to get into to make this to increase the service fee, or one of the option is you increase the service fee, which may be detrimental for some of the EV owners because they're the first EV owners, and if the service charging fee is very high, then that may be detrimental to the EV promotion or the charging that for that charging station to get revenue. So there are various business models that need to be thought into, because if you this clearly shows that it will be not be good for the private operators currently to come in and set up a charging stations, because the ROI will be very low, right? So for that case, what we many of the government incentives that need to be provided so that some of the capex cost get reduced, or the OPEX cost in terms of the tariff, or there will be no demand charges. Suppose we have not considered the demand charge here, which maybe in some of the states that is being applicable. Suppose you have a 200 kilowatt and 200 kVA is a 60 rupees per kVA is there, then you have a 12,000 rupees per month. You have to provide the demand charge. That will be huge bill on that if the EVs are not more number of EVs are not there. So in that case, we need to think of something, and one of the case will be as open access thing is India is allowed. Then you can also think of the power procurement cost, right? And real-time electricity market is also there. That after a certain time when the EVs are abundant in number, not abundant, at least a 50% of what is being thought of. If that is the number, then you can also think of that having currently a base demand, and the fluctuating demand can be met from the real-time electricity market. That is a thought actually that is not applicable right now, and that not be applicable to other countries because other countries don't have the facility for the real-time electricity market in the South Asia. And also this open access is also in India that is being allowed for this charging station owners. In other countries, they may think of this, but currently it is not allowed in any other countries apart from India. So this type of places where you can optimize. Some of you may say on the renewable thing that putting solar or not, but that can be a very solar and all, but that can be a very that will not be cost effective because you need to have a storage device and say with that. Otherwise, most of the EVs that will become are not during the day when the solar is in peak. So again, you have to put it in the grid like net metering thing or something. So that need to be well thought of, and that need to be well designed how to utilize the power of the renewable if you are directly installing some solar rooftop or something in your charging stations. Now, some of the EVSE planning tips that will be giving. That's the right location. As I've already mentioned about that, the right location is the land that need to be there, that need to be near to the substation, or need to be where your connectivity is very it is easy to get very easy connectivity. Like the cabling should not be very long. You need to do much for this cabling, but that will increase the charges in terms of municipal charges and other charges. The transformer that is there, that is available capacity, spare capacity is there in that transformer, at least during certain time of the day, then it will be very good. So you don't have to put in additional transformer, but according to MOP guidelines in India, you need to have a exclusive transformer. Then that will help to this grid upgrades right of way, that is the municipal charges and others. And also this, if you are putting up some solars and all, then there are other charges that need to be taken into account. Apart from that, then there are security charges for the discoms. That is also very high in some of the cases. Then that will be only the convenience of the customers, because the location should be near to the area where that is more penetration of EV is there, because where people will go very long to charge your EV. So that will be the minimum land cost. Expansion capabilities, the land should be available so that you can put charging stations on there when the number of EVs are abundant. Then the maximizing revenue, you can optimize your cost and maximize your revenue through this type of optimization, or you can say that choosing the right location. Everything is nearby, putting in the charging station in the place where the EVs are there, and you have a grid upgrade cost is very less. Then the right sizing, choosing the correct size of EVSE. EVSE is electric vehicle supply equipment, aligned with the charging needs and battery characteristics. Suppose in an area, the most of the EVs are two-wheelers, and four-wheelers are very minimal. So then you can put more of the EV, more of the chargers for the two-wheelers, like then Bharat AC001 or DC001, and one of the fast chargers like Type 2 AC. If there are fast charging is needed, and you feel that the more of the EVs are coming, or that area, more of the two-wheelers are coming for frequent charging. And for four-wheelers, if there, then you can put on the CCS and CHAdeMO and other charges, because that will help to reduce your cost on the charging chargers, because the chargers are the cost of the chargers are very high. The CCS and CHAdeMO cost about 9 lakh. Or the Bharat DC, I can show you that if in the Bharat AC001 is approx cost including GST hardly 40,000, and Type 2 AC chargers is 80,000 for CCS2 and CHAdeMO is 9 lakh. So these type of things can also help you to reduce your expenses. Then planning studies, need to conduct detailed modeling studies on the grid to assess the impact of ABS before planting new connection to public stations. Obviously, that is to be done from the utility perspective. Currently, we're doing it for Bangalore. They're planning ABSC. We're selecting the ideal locations and doing this feeder-wise analysis and the load flow study in those feeders. And we're mainly we're also taking into account the rooftop solar that are there in those feeders. What's called those are connected to the feeders and the EV charging stations. If they're connected, how it will help in this rooftop solar or addition, how it will help to those in the balancing of this grid and others. So this planning study is needed because there will be harmonic injection, because EV is a non-linear load, and that can be detrimental to the utility grid, and there may be a failure and others. For this harmonic injection others, we need to see how to implement the harmonic filters and all. In the right business model, the utility-owned charging stations, fleet operators, PSUs bundling with highway costs, and all the various business models that can be think of the charging as a service. Suppose utilities owning the charging stations and involved and putting in the capex and distribute and considering the capex into the ARR, annual revenue requirement, and so that it can be passed on to the consumer base. But the distribution companies catering to, and if so much capex is if there are 100 charging stations, and if you put a pass through that to the consumers, there will hardly increase a 1 or 2% tariff. So that utility on charging station to be there. They can operate that also with proper capacity building of these utilities and others, and formation of an EV sale, capacity building of utilities and all. But charging as a service can also be given, or an operator from outside can charge and will be paid a fixed fee for maintaining the charging stations, like electric bus that is happening in India right now. Then the fleet operators also can put up charging stations, because they have a motivation for that, because they will have like 5,000 cars, Ubers or Olas are running currently in Kolkata city. If there is a fleet operator, they can put up so many charging stations if they electrify their own fleet. Electrification of 5,000 fleet in Calcutta is very easy currently. So they can do that. Then the PSUs are coming up already. ESL, REIL in India are doing that. In other countries also they can do that. In South Asia, Southeast Asia, the fleet operators also can do that. And bundling with highway cost, you are preparing highway, and you can bundle that cost into that charging stations cost into the highway. So many charging stations can come up, and that can be included in the toll. So when included in the toll, it will be a very slight increase in the toll tax for that. Provision for ancillary service, obviously, this vehicle grid integration is already being there. As various pilots have been taken place in USA and California and others, and this is not currently being taken up in India anywhere or in South Asia, but that is a distant thought. considering that first the EV should come and then we can use that EV into the integrating into the grid and providing them frequency support and others during that peak hours and by providing power from the battery of the EVs if that time they are not getting used. So that we can do. So these are the ancillary services. So thank you for this SARC Energy Center opportunity to speak here. Mr. Umar, over to you. Any more questions?
Thank you very much. Yes, I've got around 5 questions from the participants. So the first question is from Mr. Namge Tenzin. He's asking that what will be the effect of increasing charging stations on the existing power grid? It's quite a generic question, but if you would like to reply it with a
sorry. Mr. Umar, can you repeat? There is some voice break actually. I just missed that question.
Yeah, so the question from Mr. Namge Tenzin is that what will be the effect of increasing charging stations on existing power grid? So probably you could quantify it that by how much amount of increase in the charging stations or by how much kilowatt increase in the charging station in a particular substation, if you have done any study or any quantitative research on it.
No, actually, we have not done any quantitative research. Obviously, we'll be doing, but the thing is that we are already carrying out some studies. So, but quantifying, that kind of studies I have not done rightly. So there will be impact on that, but that will depend on that how much charging stations you are putting up in a city right now. With the current city, if you put a 50 or 100 kilowatt charging, 100 charging stations with the capacity which I show, there will not be any impact on the grid because even in some of the places, in most of the places, you are upgrading the grid with the new line, new transformer and others. Now, if it looking at a broader picture of power demand and power supply, that how the supply and all, obviously there will be increase in the supply. There will be more power will be consumed with the EV, and there will be increase in the supply. But distribution grid need to be upgraded because that is being done currently. When you're putting up a charging station or putting new equipments on that, obviously with more number of EVs, some of the major substation level distribution upgradation will be there, and with maybe with 100% EV throughout the country, then they are for transmission grid upgradation. So it is not needed right now. The location-wise upgradation we are currently doing, and the distribution substation level upgradation will be needed with much more EVs to come. That is not being quantified right now, at least by ISGF, with some studies that they are going to look into. So this is my.
All right, thank you. We have a question from Mr. Roshan Chetri. He's asking that on slide number 6, the cost of land is not considered. So what is the reason for not considering the cost of land?
See, the cost of land we have not considered because that's a generic thing, because we have not done any, we are not, this value is not for any particular project. This is for you to understand what is there. Land we didn't consider because the land cost may vary place to place, and there will, in a mall, the land cost will vary, or if you're putting a utility can putting in your own substation, one substation you can, in your own substation, suppose a utility has some sufficient land, they can put the charging stations there also. Right, if they have some government land, they're at a reduced price, or they can lease the land, or lease the land, or they can rent, or you can say that they can buy the land. So that depends on the operator or the owner who will be operating the charging station. How you are going to approach the land land allocation and all. So that will depend on the area. That will depend on the type of thing. Like you want to lease the land, then the cost will be different. You want to buy a land, the cost will be different. If you buy a land somewhere, that will be different. If you're putting in your own place, then there will be no cost. So we didn't consider that. You can consider that, obviously.
So basically, the calculations you showed, they can be considered as template, and the participants, they could use it for,
most of the 90% of the cost is already included. 90% of the cost is included. Some of the costs like land cost, we have taken that, and in the electricity tariff, you see, we have not considered the demand charge, right? In some of the states in India, also demand charge is there, but we have not considered to show you that with the minimum energy charge and no demand charge, with this type of CUF per capacity utilization factor, the net margin is not being positive in the first year. So that was our purpose, because if we increase the demand charge, then the cost will be very high anyway, it will not be positive. It will increase on the cost side, not the revenue side.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Low.
Yeah, so we have another question. You mentioned that the charging station, as per the government's policy, they would be installed at every 100 kilometer on each side of the highway. So which standard and connector is specified by the government for these charging stations?
No,
Fast
I will
charging
just tell
station.
you. Yeah, obviously. I will just take you to that. So if you see, I'll just go to another slide. If this slide, if you see, these are the charges that is mentioned by Government of India, that for the fast, and the 100 kilometers is not charging station, it's the fast charging station at 100 kilometer and one charging station at every 25 kilometer. Right. So that is not been mentioned. So one charging station at every 25 kilometer and fast charging station at every 100 kilometer. So this charger connector and the combined charging system, these are the charging standards that need to be used for the fast charger and the slow or the moderate charger. So that's the combined CCS, combined charger CCS2 at 50 kilowatt minimum, then CHAdeMO 50 kilowatt minimum, Type 2 AC 22 kilowatt minimum. Bharat DC001, that's a 15 kilowatt. Bharat DC001, that's 15 kilowatt with different voltage output. And the Bharat AC001, that's 10 kilowatt, the 3 into 3.3 kilowatt, 3 chargers will be there, or 3 guns in a single charger will be there. So if you see that this thing, I have considered on the capex one Bharat AC001, one Type 2 AC charger, one CCS2, and one CHAdeMO for the calculation. Over to Mr. Om.
Yeah, so we have another question for this slide as well. It says that why are you considering total capex by having 4 different types of charging station? Are the investors required to install various different kinds of charging stations?
See, I go to the previous slide. These are the charging stations that should be there in a, these are the chargers that should be there, when charging connectors that should be there in a charging station, as mentioned by the Ministry of Power guidelines, right? So you can use any combination. We are using this because we are taking car into account also, and so that one CCS2, one CHAdeMO need to be there. But for 2-wheelers or 3-wheelers, you can see apart from CCS and CHAdeMO, all are applicable. And you need to have one fast and the one slow charger. So the combination you can decide on that. So it's up to the owner what combination he needs to put, but there should be one fast and the one slow charger.
All right. So as per my understanding, in India by law, the owner has to install a combination of various charging stations or
That
various
has been
charging
mentioned.
stands.
Right. I've given you that with the rated voltage output and number of connectors that need to be there and all that. So this slide. I hope you are able to see the slide.
Yeah.
And in this slide, the connecting these connectors standard need to be used, like CCS or CHAdeMO and what should be the rating of that charger.
All right. Thank you. And the final question is that how much ROI is generally kept for the investor to make it financially viable for him to install an EV charger? It's regarding
See,
India.
ROI depends on how much you're in. ROI, see, I have not spoken to any of the charging station owner, and nobody has put up charging stations already. People have right now government has given this 2636 charging stations in 62 cities, that too with a subsidy. So this ESL, REIL and others, they are putting up the charging station, but no private owners are putting up any charging stations. So it's very difficult to say right now what kind of ROI, but at least what if we say this 15% at least. I can say that. I don't know what they will do, because currently you cannot expect a ROI of 15% or something. So
All right.
current situation, if someone is putting up a charging station, then we need to find out what is in his mind.
Okay.
Because
So
the calculation that I showed, it's very difficult to achieve that ROI.
all right, thank you. So I have a further question of my own. You mentioned that various agencies are installing these charging stations in India. So do they have any plans to have some sort of public-private partnership or auction them off at a later stage? Or will the government be taking the responsibility for these charging stations for a foreseeable future?
No, government, these people who will be doing that, maybe they can in a future, they can go with a service operator, service charging station as a service, and they select operators to operate those. But currently they will be operating those charging stations. And as government is getting subsidy, government is giving subsidy, so they will be operating the charging stations for right now. Later on they can, but there is no mention of that.
All right. Thank you so much. So with this, we have reached the end of our question and answer session. I thank you very much,
And one thing, Mr.
Mr.
Omar,
Yes,
I
please.
just want to mention one thing. This public-private partnership, we can go with the utility because it is one of the most viable business model in countries in South Asia. That utilities are in means utilities along with the government is providing the capex, and utilities passing through that capex to the consumers of its to its consumer base, so that there will be increase in tariff of hardly 1 paisa, 2 paisa, and the operation
Mhm.
can be taken up by an operator or a private operator who can be paid a fixed fee by the utility for that, and the revenue from the charging station can be paid to the utility. So in this model, we can go.
Perfect. Perfect. So is any utility in India following this model as of now?
As of now, they are not following, but some of them are obviously planning to follow that
Okay. Great. Great.
because this
So,
passing of this capex to the consumer need regulatory permission and all. So it takes time. They need to be aligned
okay.
with the idea that okay, and because it's also have a means political influence on that, because you will be increasing the tariff of the normal citizens and the consumer who may not be
True that.
owning EVs also, right? So that is a
Yeah.
political
True.
implication also. So it may take time, but obviously people are thinking on that line.
All right. It does make perfect sense. With this, we reach the end of our question and answer session. I thank you so much, Mr. Sudasita Kundu, for you to take out time from your schedule. I know that you have to attend another
Thank you.
meeting in like 5 minutes, so
Thank you so much.
am grateful for your participation in this webinar.
Thank you.
So, with this, now we move on to our second presentation of this webinar. Our second speaker, Mr. Hemal Thakkar, is an associate director in Chrysler Research India. He has over 10 years of professional experience in executing assignments involving automotive and logistics industry. His experience has been a mix of both consulting and industry. In his current role in customized research division at Chrysler, he leads a team of around 20 professionals working on assignments across ports, logistics, and automotive sectors. His areas of focus are identifying market potential, competitive benchmarking, traffic assessment, cost competitiveness, and regulatory aspects, to name a few. In addition to India, Mr. Hemal has worked on engagements in the UAE. Mr. Thakkar is also accompanied by Mr. Avinish Neogi, who is a senior analyst at Chrysler Research. He has around 7 years of experience in sales, planning, as well as customized research in the auto sector. His key projects include two and three-wheeler electric vehicles, demand forecasting in India, estimation and forecasting of EV charging infrastructure requirements, and auto component sector assessments. The topic of Mr. Thakkar's and Mr. Neogi's presentation is two-wheeler and three-wheeler electric vehicles demand projection in India. So over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes,
Yes,
we
I
are.
can
Yeah.
see it.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, and thank you for the kind introduction. As mentioned, I also have with me my colleague Abhishek Neogi. Both of us work together in the auto team at CRISIL. Uh, just taking on, from here, as kind of the earlier speaker also mentioned, and as also mentioned by Mohammed, we kind of look at the automotive space very, very closely in India. And CRISIL as an organization has a large department which is called CRISIL Research, which tracks more than 85 industries on an ongoing basis. And one of them is automotive. And within automotive, again, we have a lot of sub-segments, and we look at electric vehicles very, very closely. Just to give you a sense of, how big the EV industry in India is today, we've tried to just put out a few numbers, which gives a sense of, how big the industry is in India today. So if you see, on the first column, we have the electric vehicle sales for two-wheelers for the year 2018-19. So we sold around 1,26,000 two-wheeler electric vehicles in 2018-19, around 1,000 e-autos, around 6,30,000 e-rickshaws, and about 3,662 passenger vehicles. But this is a mix of both hybrid and pure BEVs. And in the buses side, we sold about 500 odd kind of electric vehicles. Similarly, if you see, for the year ending 2020, that is, this is for the financial year, that is April to March. So as of March ending 2020, we sold 20% more two-wheelers, and we ended the year at about 1,52,000 units, around 5,000 e-autos, where we showed a very promising growth of about 60%. E-rickshaws, again, we are at around 3,50,000. But what is important to note is, in e-rickshaws, our population is very, very high. If you actually see, our population on the e-rickshaw side has already, kind of breached a level of close to 2.5 million. So that's a significantly high share, with respect to population for electric vehicles in the space of e-rickshaws. They are traditionally the ones, who have replaced cycle rickshaws for that matter. Now, if you look at passenger vehicles, again, we've seen a very decent growth of about 45%. But what is very encouraging is also that there are a good number of pure BEVs also in this particular space of only what do you say PHEVs plus A. Then buses, we have achieved almost similar number of kind of numbers as compared to what it was last year. So this is how the EV scenario is today, and this is how it is looking at this point of time. What we've also then tried to see is, what is the current share of this, vehicles to the total sales of, the vehicles that happen in India. So if you look at EV two-wheelers, we sell around 1,50,000 vehicles, which is, hardly about less than 1% of the two-wheelers sold in India. So majority of them are still combustion vehicles, engine. Even with respect to auto, if you see, it's only about 0.8% of the total three-wheeler passenger vehicle sales that we have in India. E-rickshaws is completely at this point of time electric. Most of it will be lead acid batteries. We've not taken into consideration the population of cycle rickshaws that we have in India, because that will be too high. And when we look at passenger vehicles, including both hybrid and pure electric vehicles, we are at about 0.24%. And in case of buses, it is around 1.28%, where government of India is, kind of driving this particular initiative of electrification of buses, starting from state transport undertakings, kind of bidding for them under various schemes under FAME. What we've also tried to see is, what the government has been doing over the last couple of years. So the government had initially come up with, a plan which was called faster adoption and manufacturing of hybrid and electric vehicles, which was termed as FAME 1, which ended, in March 2019. And the outlay for the same initially was 795 crores, but then was increased by about 100 crores to 895 crores. Or 695 crores, sorry. It was then increased to about 795 crores. But if you see on the right hand side box, on the right hand side box on the lower part of the slide, you will see that, most of the, kind of outlay was for demand incentives. That was 50% of, the overall outlay. At about 495 crores out of 795 crores. And, there was some outlay that was made for charging infrastructure and, some kind of technology platform, etc. But if you ask me, the outlay by the government was very, very minuscule there. Now, what we also see now is when you look at FAME 2, the outlay is more than 10 times of what it was in FAME 1. The outlay has been close to 9,500 crores, in which the outlay for demand incentives is more than 90% of the total contribution. But there is also a significant amount that is being provided as subsidy for charging infrastructure, as the government of India realizes that there is a need to set up charging infrastructure for EV adoption to increase substantially. And if you see the outlay for demand incentives, though for fiscal 20 is 822 crores, which has also not been completely utilized. But the demand outlay for 21 and 22 is fairly high at 4,500 crores and about 3,200 crores for 21 and 22. So this scheme is currently for vehicles till fiscal 22, and there is a minimum level of localization that is mandated for vehicles to qualify as a part of the scheme. So that is what we've tried to highlight in the box above. So if you see qualifying criteria for vehicles getting the below mentioned subsidy, minimum 50% localization for two-wheeler proposed, and gradual increase of basic customs duty, 3-year comprehensive warranty on battery from the manufacturer, and the vehicle should be fitted with suitable monitoring devices to know mileage of vehicles. And private vehicles under two-wheelers are also allowed under this scheme. Apart from two-wheelers, in the other category of vehicles, they are largely available for public transport and not available for personal transport. Subsidy is not available for personal transport. If you see, for example, for two-wheelers, there can be 10 lakh two-wheelers or 1 million two-wheelers that can be funded as a part of the scheme. And there they have mentioned that the approximate size of the battery in terms of kilowatt hour for two-wheelers has to be about 2 kilowatt hour. The incentive that they are proposing is about 10,000 rupees, or maximum incentive is 20% of the vehicle cost. Today, if you see, the maximum ex-factory price for availing this inventory is 1.5 lakh rupees. So if your vehicle is more than 1.5 lakh rupees, you will not qualify for this subsidy. And the total fund that they have for this is about 2,000 crores. Out of this, 9,000 crores that is mentioned here. So what we've tried to give a sense is, if you look at the subsidy that was provided in FAME 1, it was 17,000 to 22,000. That's the range in which you had the subsidy. Under FAME 2, if you see, you can get 20% of the vehicle cost, or 10,000 rupees per kilowatt hour. So even if it is a 2 kilowatt hour battery, you get about 20,000 rupees as subsidy. And if the price is up to 1.5 lakhs, and the battery size is a little higher, you can also go to about 30,000 rupees as subsidy. So if you ask me, the subsidy structure is largely similar, or in fact it has got better. The major difference is also that they are only supporting lithium ion vehicles and not lead acid vehicles. What we've also done is, we've tried to give a sense of, the kind of localization levels that has been proposed as a part of, FAME 2. They have also released another document which is called Phased Manufacturing Program, under which, in various timelines, they have come out with, kind of localization levels that need to be met for various, components that are used in manufacturing the two-wheeler at this point of time. And if you see, what they are trying to do is, they have given a date taking into consideration the technological capability that India has. They have tried to give a sense of how is it for e-rickshaw as well as e-auto. Now, if you actually see, most of this have been postponed by about 6 months, taking into consideration the current COVID scenario that we are having across the globe. But if you largely see, most of the important parts, like lithium ion cells, or even motor controller, etc., the proposed timeline is with respect to kind of localizing is fairly decent. You kind of can kind of do localization by them, taking into consideration the what do you say, the capabilities or the technological capabilities that we have in India at this point of time. However, the government has proposed that the basic custom duty will get revised for a few components from the 1st April 2021. If you see on the left hand side, for battery packs and for kind of DC charger as well as motor controller. But what is very important to see, understand is, this is more with respect to propelling local component manufacturers to take up manufacturing here in India. Also, if you see on the right hand side, what we have tried to give a sense is the kind of warranty that the manufacturers are kind of in a way supposed to give to claim this particular subsidy. If you see, for three-wheeler auto, the manufacturer is supposed to give a warranty of 3 years and 80,000 kilometers. And for e-rickshaw, it is 3 years and 40,000 kilometers. In case of e-two-wheelers, it is 3 years and 20,000 kilometers. only if they provide this warranty along with the localization levels that are mandated, then we actually see, the vehicles qualifying for subsidy, or else, these vehicles will not qualify for subsidy. Then what we've tried to do is, there are various business models that are, kind of currently prevalent in India, for which two and three wheelers are used. We've tried to give a sense of those. Now, there are a few players that are very prominent in India at this point of time with respect to EV two-wheeler. There are players like Ather, there is Okinawa, there are also players like, kind of Bajaj Auto, which have got into this space, and also TVS Motors, which has recently got into this space. So if you see, these are largely players into B2C business. And, their basically objective is to provide emission-free, kind of mobility to people at large. And if you see, kind of the other business models that are there. So there is a B2B business model that has come in, where if you see, there are companies which are tying up with, the likes of Zoom Cars, or, you have a company which is a startup in Bangalore, which is called FAE Bikes, where they are providing, two-wheelers either on rental basis or, on lease basis, depending on, how the customer wants it for a particular time period. So not lease, sorry, it is either on rental basis, so it can be monthly fixed rent, it can be daily rent. So there are different packages that, that are kind of designed by various entities that are there in this particular space. Zoomcar also has kind of started this to a certain extent, and kind of this is being done largely for cars at this point of time, but there are some bit of two-wheelers also that they plan to add as a part of their fleet. When we look at the third business model that is there, so we have seen Sun Mobility, and you would have read a lot in newspapers that they have tied up with Indian Oil to set up swappable charging stations across a lot of places in India, and they are wanting to kind of pilot one of these cities in India, where they would want to try this with two and three wheelers, and then take it forward to other places in India. So that is the third business model that we have, and the fourth is companies like Lithium Group or Auto World, where what they are trying to do is where they are trying to lease the vehicle separately and battery separately. So what happens is, if the battery is leased, it actually reduces the cost of ownership substantially. Because if you look at a E two-wheeler or a E three-wheeler today, about 50% or more cost is, only because of the battery. So that is something that gets saved substantially because of, this model. Similarly, when you look at EV three-wheelers, you again have a B2C model where you have, a few players like Kinetic, which is a very prominent player in this space. You've got Mahindra Electric, which is again a very known player. You've got OK Play. These are certain players in the B2C space. Similarly, in the B2B space, you have, kind of, two prominent players at this point of time. Ola has been using a lot of e-autos and e-rickshaws, on their platform, especially in Delhi and Gurgaon. And Smart E is another setup, which has kind of come up in a big way, which is largely used for, transportation of goods in a way. And, they are largely an aggregator who are set up in Gurgaon and which has a fleet of about 1,000 e-rickshaws. So if you see, the third concept is, very similar to two-wheelers, that is with Sun Mobility, which is into swapping. And the fourth is again with Lithium Group, with respect to, kind of, leasing the battery. And that these concepts are similar in both two-wheelers and three-wheelers for that matter. What we've then tried to do is we've tried to give a sense of, how the total cost of ownership is today for EV two-wheelers in India and EV three-wheelers in India for a few segments, and how does that look going forward. And we've taken into consideration that FAME subsidy will be available till fiscal 22, but we've taken a scenario where if FAME subsidy is not available post 22 also, how will the cost economics work out? If you actually see what all have we considered as a part of this total cost of ownership. So there are two parts that we've taken into consideration. One is, the acquisition cost of the vehicle. That is, you will have the cost of the vehicle, including the battery, excluding the battery, then you have the battery cost. You will kind of add all road taxes, registrations that are there on this. So at this point of time, most of the states have waived off road tax for electric vehicles. But yes, there are some minor RTO charges, flat charges of about 500,000 bucks to register the vehicle, and insurance, which is mandatory. And if the vehicle is financed, then you also need to pay the finance cost. So that may be either in terms of interest rate, so that will get factored into your EMI. And then when you look at the running cost, you are actually looking at the cost of charging for in case of electric vehicles. You're also looking at the maintenance cost. And if you are owning the vehicle for more than 3 years, we've also looked at a scenario where you will be actually replacing your battery, because your warranty also lapses after that. And then we tried to add some kind of resale value, though that is not something which is very clearly available today, because there are not many vehicles which are up for replacement, because this is a very early starter that we are seeing in India at this point of time. So we have used some kind of approximation, taking into consideration the depreciated value of the asset at the end of 3 years, and then based on whatever is the value that is left over, we have taken into consideration that if the battery cost is near nil, what is it that we'll fetch for the body. So we have taken into consideration typical resale value of a ICE two-wheeler or a ICE three-wheeler in the market. And then we've taken into consideration that 50% of the cost will not be available, because that is largely pertaining to battery. And then we have kind of used that as a proxy to arrive at the resale value. So how does this look like when you take all these factors into consideration? So if you see in the left hand side at the top, we've tried to give a sense of what is the typical model that we've considered to do this kind of total cost of ownership analysis for a e-wheeler two-wheeler EV scooter. And what is it that we've considered in terms of our assumptions in terms of lithium ion price. We've considered subsidy in 2019, but going forward in 25 and 30, we've not considered any kind of subsidy. Even in 23, we've not kind of considered any kind of subsidy. We have kind of taken into consideration some kind of enhancement in terms of range availability going forward. So we are expecting that the range availability through so what we have taken into consideration is energy density will get better over a period of time. And today if a battery gives you a range of about 75 kilometers on a single charge, it will get enhanced to about 100 kilometers in 25 and about 125 in 2030. And we've also tried to give a sense of how the battery capacity would move going forward. Now if we take these things into consideration, we have again considered two scenarios. One is for an individual who stays in a metro city, so the likes of Mumbai, Delhi, and the other who stays in a non-metro city. The reason to consider two different scenarios is typically the metro city guy travels for lower lead distances, as things are in a nearby vicinity. Or what also happens is, typically in most of the metro cities that you have in India, people actually stay on rent. So there they would largely prefer to buy their house which is very closer to office. And there is some kind of leisure activity which happens over the weekend. But typically if you look at most of the non-metro cities in India, what happens is the industrial clusters or workplaces are largely developed on the outskirts of the city. Hence the average lead of traveling is high. So the running is very different between a metro city and a non-metro city, and hence we have taken two kind of examples. So you can clearly see when the running is high, the viability gets better even earlier. If you actually see, EV two-wheeler is viable even today, with considering the FAME subsidy, of course, at this point of time. So even if we do not consider the FAME subsidy going forward, we still feel if we take into consideration the total cost of ownership, electric vehicles are viable even as of today. Also, what one need to understand is, for doing this, we have taken into consideration a supply cost of about 10.6 rupees per kilowatt hour, which is fairly substantial if you ask me. But still, if you ask me, even after taking that into consideration, we are getting a scenario where EV two-wheeler is kind of, what do you say, it breaks even, and it is, basically much more viable at this point of time as compared to an ICE vehicle. So you can see that, in the calculations here. So this, we've done for 3 years, 5 years, as well as 7 years. Similarly, when we look at e-auto, now you'll actually see, what we've tried to do is very similar in e-auto. We've taken into consideration the cost of other, kind of vehicles. So combustion engine vehicles, CNG, petrol, as well as diesel. Though diesel is very, very less in terms of e-auto, it is higher in the e-loader space. But in terms of e-auto, it is fairly low. It is largely CNG and petrol. So if you see, the acquisition cost is high, but the FAME subsidy is also very reasonable in case of EV three-wheelers. So if you actually see, and the battery capacity is about 7.4 kilowatt hour, and we've considered about life of about 1500 cycles. So if you actually see, we can clearly see that, if what we've seen is, even in case of passenger vehicles for that matter, the ones that are used for cab aggregators, or the ones that are having higher running, the viability is achieved really faster as compared to, in case of personal vehicles where the running is going to be lower. So if you see, in all three cases we are actually seeing that, the viability is achieved faster. So when you look at a CNG case, petrol case, diesel case, so despite, kind of EV being much more costlier in terms of acquisition cost, when you actually look at total cost of ownership, it kind of is very much manageable. Now, despite that, what is it that is, kind of not leading to this segment doing really well? So in the commercial segment, what is very, very important is financing. So their financing is a big bottleneck because, financials are not funding these vehicles with attractive LTVs, that is loan to value. The reason being that they are finding a lot of risk while they are funding this particular asset, because the resale value at this point of time is not known, and hence, it becomes difficult for them to fund this vehicle with, their entire, what do you say, so there may be an intent from their side to fund it, but the risk matrix is basically not allowing them to basically fund the vehicle the way they would have. And the interest rates are also very, very high. It's about 18% for an e-rickshaw and about 13 to 14% for a good customer, for a ICE vehicle at this point of time. So you can look at the delta, it's about as high as about 5 to 6%. Similarly, when you look at e-rickshaw, there is no comparison. The comparison is largely, with a, what do you say, with the cycle rickshaw. Of course, the earnings are far more better in terms of e-rickshaws compared to cycle rickshaw. And also, if you see, if you look at a good e-rickshaw that is there in the market today, there is a very famous brand called Mayuri in India, which sells very good numbers. And so if you look at a, kind of e-rickshaw with a lead acid battery and with a lithium ion battery, this is the, kind of difference in terms of the acquisition cost. But if you remove, the subsidy, the difference is hardly about 20,000 rupees. But what is very important is, if you look at the charging cycles for which it lasts, there is, where the difference is. And if you actually kind of then take into consideration a e-rickshaw which is with lithium ion, you actually, tend to earn very, very good in comparison to what you would have been earning using a lead acid battery. So we are seeing a slow and gradual pickup here in this segment, and we anticipate that going forward there will be a lot of inclination towards this segment. However, it will also depend on how aggressive financiers get in this space. And this kind of vehicles are largely very prominent in the northern part of the country at this point of time. Taking all these things into consideration, how do we see, will be the forecast for electric vehicle two-wheelers, going forward in 2030 and, in intermittent years. So what we feel is, at this point of time, if you see, in 2019, we had sold about 1,20,000 vehicles. All these are in million units. The same we are expecting it to reach at about 7 lakh units in, kind of 2023, of which 6,50,000 will be, kind of kind of scooter sales, and we are expecting this to reach 7 million by 2030. So if you see from that perspective, we are expecting EV two-wheelers to reach about 37% of total sales of two-wheelers in India by 2030, and we are expecting the penetration in scooters to be about 75% of total sales. So electrification will be largely driven in the two-wheeler side, mostly by scooters and not by motorcycles. Similarly, when we look at three-wheelers, what we've tried to give a sense is if you look at three-wheeler, on that is goods and passengers, e-loaders as well as e-rickshaws. What we actually see is in terms of passenger, we are expecting the sales to increase substantially and to reach about 2,50,000 by 23 and about close to 5 lakhs by 25, which will kind of be about a substantial chunk of the total sales of passenger vehicles then. So it will reach about 60%, and it will stay in that band of 60-65% by 2030. One huge kind of competition to electric vehicles in India even going forward is going to be CNG in three wheelers. On the goods side, we are seeing lesser momentum at this point of time, and we are expecting it to reach about 30%. However, what will define this penetration going forward is the kind of products that come in. So for passenger, we still have very good products that have come in the market at this point of time. However, we are still waiting for good quality products coming out on the goods vehicle side. So there, if there are any products, the penetration could further inch up. Similarly, when we are looking at e-loader sales, we are actually looking at e-loader sales to increase marginally to about 28,000, in 23, and then reach about 43,000 in, kind of 2030. These are largely going to replace hand carts that are there in India at this point of time, and they'll be something which can help in reducing a lot of human effort going forward. Also, when we look at e-rickshaws, we are already selling a very good number of about 3.5 lakh vehicles in FY20 itself, and it had actually reached 600,000 a year also. And the total park that we are looking at is about 24 lakhs or 2.4 million. So if you see, we are again expecting that to largely stay, in that range, and we expect it to reach very close to about a million, e-rickshaws going forward in fiscal 30. One reason for this category, to actually do well or stay in that range is with mass transportation systems being developed in India with the likes of metro, mono, etc. And with the Indian government showing a lot of promise with respect to smart cities going forward. So there, if you take those things into consideration, we still feel, there is scope for this kind of vehicle category to do really well because, this will be more green than any other kind of vehicle that you have. And for shorter leads, that is from your metro station to your home or to your residence, this is something, which will be very, very useful. Yeah, that's it from, our side. If there are any kind of questions, we'll be more than happy to take it forward.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So we have two questions from participants. I would also request participants to send in more questions while we are discussing these two questions. So the first question is that on slide number 12, 13 and 14, how have you calculated and shown the running cost of two-wheelers and three-wheelers?
So if you actually see, we have taken into consideration the typical lead distance that the three-wheeler runs in a particular year or the two-wheeler runs in a particular year. We have taken into consideration the range that it, kind of it runs through in one particular charge, and hence the number of times it will have to charge in a particular year, and what will be the charging cost per unit that we have kind of taken. So that I have highlighted, we've taken it at about 10.6 rupees per kilowatt hour, and based on that we have arrived at the running cost. Apart from that, the current packages that the Indian companies are offering with respect to maintenance, etc., has been considered, when we take maintenance cost into consideration. So taking these two things, largely sums up the running cost of EV, what do you say, two-wheelers. In case of three-wheelers, we've also taken into consideration, the cost that typically a person would incur in case if he is driving somebody else's vehicle. So there is a fixed cost that he needs to give to the vehicle owner for using his vehicle. So we have taken that into consideration. This is for electric vehicles. And when you take into consideration for combustion engine, we have taken into consideration, typical lead distance, mileage that is being provided by any type of fuel, whichever fuel they use, whether it is petrol, diesel, CNG, whatever. The cost per liter or kg for CNG or for petrol, diesel or CNG, and the maintenance cost that is there for that particular vehicle. Taking these things into consideration, we've addressed both kind of running cost for electric vehicles as well as for ICE vehicles.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have another question. What will be the expected effect of COVID-19 on FAME2 subsidies and the custom duties which have been mentioned that they will be increasing in near future?
So at this point of time, the government has been kind enough to extend the FAME to, not FAME to, I want to say the deadlines by about 6 months. So as time progresses, I am sure the government is taking necessary steps to take things into consideration, because they are also aware that at this point of time, the local industry is still emerging, and there is dependence on imports for a few key components, and there is this requirement that they'll have to maybe push along for a few months. So if you ask me, at this point of time, it seems that the government stance is quite accommodative, and we are hopeful that they will definitely postpone the deadlines. They have done this by 6 months. So if COVID does not subside maybe in the next month or so, I am sure this can be pushed further.
Thank you very much. We have one question from Mr. Faisal Abbas. He's asking that
Okay.
what other programs is India planning in future? I think it's in relation to subsidy programs or renewable energy programs for electric vehicles.
So if you ask me, the government has come out with a very detailed document on FAME and phase manufacturing plan. So which is already there on the website of Government of India, and that is there till fiscal 22. So as of now, they have laid out everything that they plan to give as a part of this scheme. And as the earlier speaker also mentioned, they have laid out a few things, which are from with respect to charging infrastructure. So the government is supporting from both ends with respect to whatever is required at this point of time to set up, or to ensure that electric vehicles get that kind of propulsion in India. Abhishek, anything else you would like to add here?
Uh, Actually, as in the action is happening in two places. One is at the national level that you have already pointed out, that is through the FAME and the PMP programs that is being run, and also to mention the smart city program. A lot of Indian states are also into, they have come up with a policy to woo customers, giving them direct subsidy and also giving them subs for manufacturing of electric vehicles. So that is
Right.
also something that the federal states of India have come across to make this adoption happen quicker.
Yes, that's a very valid point. So as Abhishek mentioned, a lot of states, like Maharashtra, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, these states have come up with EV policies, specific EV policies, to kind of attract investment in these states. And a lot of them have also kind of been kind to give a few subsidies with respect to transitioning to electric vehicles from combustion engine vehicles today. So they are trying their level best to lure as many customers as possible.
Thank you so much. Also have read that South Indian states are very active regarding the adoption of electric vehicles, and probably the manufacturing centers are also located in south of India.
So if you look at two-wheelers, yes, you have the likes of Ather, which is Bangalore based. And if you ask me, they have been pioneers in kind of driving electric vehicle mobility in the two-wheeler space in India. They have largely focused on creating a very good experience for the user or the rider. They have not been aggressively pushing their vehicles. And the other player which is very prominent is Okinawa, which is largely located in the northern part of the country. Apart from that, you have Bajaj, which has started its manufacturing in Pune, and TVS, in the southern part of the country. So yes, in the southern part we have two players, but what is important is Bangalore, being a tech city of India, has always shown promise with respect to experimenting and using the kind of products that are kind of launched in the electric vehicle space. And that is a testing ground for most of the electric vehicle manufacturers, and hence you see a lot of action there.
All right. We have question from Mohua Mukherjee. The question is that what are your assumptions about battery life and battery performance in high temperature? Your model treats all years the same, but maybe in year 3 the battery is capable of fewer charge and discharges if the battery life is getting reduced. So could you please comment on this concern?
So, if you ask me, in our current assumption, we have taken into consideration only 3 years as the life of the battery, and post that, he'll have to replace the battery. We have not taken into consideration any life which is more than 3 years. Abhishek, you can add on if required, because at
Yes,
this
yes, that
point of
assumption is
time,
correct.
yeah. So as of now, there is no technology that has come into India which will allow to repair a few cells or a particular set of cells if they have to be changed in a particular battery. So from that perspective, after 3 years, the battery will have to be completely replaced. But going forward, you cannot rule out that there could be some kind of changes that could happen to this particular concept. But as of now, it's at a very nascent stage and it is difficult to comment. But as of now, with respect to our assumptions, we've considered 3 years as the battery life for a particular vehicle while calculating total cost of ownership. And for a 5-year period, we've considered one battery replacement, and for a 7-year period, we've considered two battery replacements.
Thank you. So I have one question of my own regarding two-wheelers, which is the motorcycles, electric motorbikes. What
Right.
is your assessment regarding the overall lifetime of an electric bike?
What do you mean by lifetime of an electric bike?
Like we know that the internal combustion electric motorbikes, they could be run for up to 10 to 15 years easily. So
Right.
when we consider the life cycle costs of or when we compare the life cycle costs of electric bikes with the traditional bikes, so what we have to take into account the overall lifetime of a particular equipment. So
So
for
if
that,
you
what
ask,
should be the expected
yeah,
lifetime?
so if you ask me, I don't think there should be any challenge for electric vehicle running for as long as what a combustion engine runs today, because the build is very similar. The only difference is instead of a engine you have a battery here. So from that perspective, depending on battery life, the life of the electric vehicle will be fairly very similar. Yes, you will have to keep replacing the battery at intermittent intervals to ensure that the vehicle gives you good performance. And going forward, as energy density improves, we are sure life of batteries will also start getting better. Even today, though the manufacturers give only a warranty of about 3 years on battery, we have seen that for good players in the e-two-wheeler space, who are providing very good kind of chemical combinations with respect to battery cells, there we are seeing that the battery lasts for as high as 5 to 6 years also, if the vehicle is used very well. So from that perspective, if you ask me, the life of EV two-wheelers will be very similar to that of ICE vehicles. Yes, you'll have to take into consideration the replacement of battery that happens over a period of time.
All right. Thank you so much. So
Welcome.
with this, we reach the end of our question and answer session. I thank you, Mr. Avinesh and Mr. Thakkar, for your time. And it was on a short notice, so I am grateful that you joined us today. We are looking forward to having you on our future webinars as well.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you. Pleasure is ours. Thank you very much.
So, ladies and gentlemen, with this now we reach the third presentation. We will now be presenting the third presentation of our session. Let me update my screen first. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will be giving a short answer. So, as I introduced myself earlier, I'm Mohammad Umar Mukhtar, and I'm a research fellow, energy, transport, and environment at SARC Energy Center, Islamabad. I joined SARC Energy Center in 2018, and my major areas of focus have been energy, data statistics, transport sector assessments, and environmental related studies. Let me give you a brief overview of what this presentation will entail. So, firstly, we will be discussing the road transport sector overview of Pakistan. Afterwards, I will present an economic case for the electric vehicles viability in the context of Pakistan. Thirdly, the EV policy 2020, which has been recently approved by the government in June 2020. So I will be giving a background of that electric vehicle policy. Afterwards, I will be giving the policy framework salient features of the 2020 EV policy. And finally, the road forward would be given in the form of few recommendations and suggestions. So the road transport sector in Pakistan is growing at a double-digit rate due to a number of factors. These factors are basically increase in population. People in the region with almost 64% of the total population below 30 years of age. The overall population in the country is growing at an annual growth rate of 2.1%. Pakistan also has the Asia. It is mainly due to the commencement of China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Network currently, the highway network currently is almost 12,000 kilometers and is responsible for almost 80% of the total commercial traffic in the country. Presently, the total number of registered vehicles is around 23.5 million, and the total number of vehicles is estimated to reach 32 million by 2025. By 2025, there will also be an addition of 3,000 kilometers of highway network to the already existing road network. Therefore, in the next 5 years, the network of highways in Pakistan is anticipated to increase by 25%, while the total length of motorways is expected to increase by 3 times. So cumulatively, all these factors will add a tremendous amount of burden on the existing road network. Now let us look at the transport sector with the lens of energy and environment. The chart on the right side shows the breakdown of registered vehicles in the country. It can be seen that out of 23.5 million total vehicles in the country, only 13%, that is 3 million vehicles, are passenger cars or four-wheelers, which shows that Pakistan has a low level of passenger vehicle ownership. In fact, only 9% of households in Pakistan own a car. However, when we look at the motorcycles, nearly half of all households in Pakistan own a motorcycle, as they constitute around 74% of the vehicle stock, as shown in the chart. So another important factor is that these vehicles consume a total of 8 million ton of oil equivalent in terms of diesel and petrol, with the motorcycles alone consuming 3.5 million tons of fuel. As a result, the transport sector now contributes around 30% of greenhouse gas emissions in Pakistan, with a total of 54 million tons CO2 emitted in 2017. So the concerns about climate change and environmental pollution have forced the government to take a number of actions ranging from adoption of Euro 6 emission standards for new vehicles with internal combustion engines and formulation of a new electric vehicle policy earlier this year. So now we look at the economic case for electric vehicles. Pakistan has to endure a substantial socio-economic cost for its transport sector. There is a high bill for the import of oil, and it is one of the leading factors in escalating trade deficit of the country. Presently, Pakistan imports oil worth US almost 13 billion US dollar, and if the transport sector continues to expand at the present rate, then the bill for fuel imports is expected to rise up to $30 billion by 2025, putting further pressure on foreign exchange reserves of the country. In this context, electric vehicles can play a beneficial role in reducing the dependency on imported oil, and it will help the government in its drive to reduce the trade deficit. The purchase price of electric vehicles is quite high. Cheap operation and maintenance can offset the purchase price in the long run and save money for the consumers. However, as mentioned in the previous presentations, when we talk about transport sector electrification, there are different types of electric vehicles that can be introduced. These include the passenger vehicles, light electric vehicles such as e-motorcycles and e-rickshaws, electric buses, etc. There is an increasing evidence in the context of Pakistan that from purely economic point of view, the four-wheeler electric passenger cars are not economically viable for a consumer as their running cost cannot offset the initial high purchase price. However, light electric vehicles are certainly viable for both the consumers and the government. So here, a rough calculation and estimation is shown to present the economic case in favor of electric bikes. As you can see that the total number of electric bikes in Pakistan is around 17.5 million. For a replacement case of 30% motorcycles conversion to e-bikes in Pakistan, the total number of bikes conversion in that case would be 5.25 million. The petrol cost to the government for these 5.25 million bikes is around $640 million per annum. However, if these 5.25 million bikes are converted to electric vehicles, they would require additional power generation in the form of fuel imports. We need to compare if the additional power generation needed, if it can offset the petrol cost of the internal combustion motorbikes as compared to the electric bikes. So we see that the additional power generation requirement is 2,100 gigawatt hour, and the additional generation fuel cost is around 16 million US dollar. So this calculation shows that the total fuel import savings per year for the government in the case of 30% conversion of bikes would be around 580 million US dollars, which is quite significant. And another important factor to notice here is that the Pakistan's total power generation capacity, or the total power generation, actual power generation realized in 2018 was 107,000 gigawatt hour. So an additional 2,000 gigawatt requirement is only total of 2% additional requirement, which Pakistan's power sector can easily compensate for. There's also a linear relationship between the number of bikes converted to electric vehicle and the forex savings to the government. So if instead of 30% replacement of bikes, we go for 10,000 bikes replacement or 100,000 bikes replacement or 500,000 bike replacement, so the relationship will stay linear. So let's, just for the sake of calculation, for only 100,000 bikes, if they are converted to electric vehicle, the fuel import savings to the government will be $11 million per year. Now we come to the EV policy background. So there has been a lot of confusion regarding the EV policy 2020. The policy consultations had been going on since 2019. So let me give you a quick recap of what had been going on and how we arrived at the current policy. So Ministry of Climate Change first approached the Prime Minister in May 2019 and introduced the electric vehicles and pressed for the need for EV policy. By November 2019, a policy framework was presented by the Ministry of Climate Change, which covered two-wheelers, three-wheelers, four-wheelers, and heavy vehicles. However, Ministry of Industrial Production, Engineering Development Board, and the Auto Industry Development Committee, which is the AIDC, they opposed covering the four-wheeler passenger vehicles under the policy till the time the current auto policy is active. So the current auto policy is active from 2016 to 2021. It does not cover the electric vehicles. However, in order to protect the current policy, it was suggested to not include four-wheelers for the time being. So government formed an interministerial committee in April 2020 to finalize the policy framework before submission to the Economic Coordination Committee. The ECC of the Cabinet finally approved the EV policy in June 2020, which covers two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and heavy vehicles only, and it does not cover four-wheelers for the time being. So now let's have a look at the salient features of the policy. So for the electric two-wheelers, the government has announced that the general sales tax at sales stage, it will be reduced to only 1%, and at the import stage, it will be totally waived off to avoid refunds. So overall, for a period of 5 years, the sales tax policy framework is quite liberal. When it comes to import of electric vehicle specific parts, there will be only a 1% custom duty for 5 years, and a list of major EV specific parts are also provided by the policy. Thirdly, the existing manufacturing regime for two and three wheelers with respect to non-EV parts and components will remain intact to safeguard the already achieved localization. The electric two and three wheelers will also be exempted from registration and annual token tax. Furthermore, the toll taxes and the highway taxes, they will be reduced to 50%. Finally, import of new electric vehicles in CBU condition at concessionary rate of duty, which is the 50% of prevailing rate of custom duty, it will be linked with the establishment of manufacturing facilities. For example, if a company it decides to establish a manufacturing facility somewhere in Pakistan, it will be given a concessionary rate of 50% less duty for import of CBU vehicles. They can import a maximum of 2,000 units of CBU vehicles for the time being. Afterwards, they have to achieve the necessary localization. When it comes to electric heavy commercial vehicles, the policy is also quite similar. There's only 1% customs duty on the import of CBUs, and import of entire CKD is allowed at 1% custom duty as well. Again, there is no GST at import stage and only 1% GST at sales stage for 5 years. Again, electric HCVs are exempted from registration and annual token tax. There will be 50% reduction on these vehicles on highways in the form of toll taxes. Then we have general proposals in this policy for both two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and the heavy commercial vehicles. These general proposals are part of the policy, and they form a very important part of the framework of benefits for the private sector. So number one, the duty and tax-free import of plant and machinery is allowed, and this is allowed to both the new entrants in the two and three wheelers as well as the old auto manufacturers. There will be 5-year income tax exemption for auto part manufacturers for setting up manufacturing facility for EV related equipment. The localization of parts and components will be reviewed only after 2 years of the announcement of policy. The inputs for EV vendors will be exempted from duties and taxes for 5 years. Furthermore, the funding facility of the State Bank of Pakistan to encourage green investments will also be will also be made available to the EV manufacturers, EV parts, components, and module manufacturers, and EV infrastructure development companies, including those who are developing the charging stations. Furthermore, there will be 5 years income tax exemption for manufacturers of EV equipment and infrastructure development. Finally, the import of charging stations will be carried out at 0% duty, while import of chargers with the CKD kits will only be rated at 1% of custom duty and sales tax. So overall, ladies and gentlemen, you see that these are very liberal policy features in the 2020 EV policy Pakistan. In the previous presentation, we had a look at the FAME2 subsidy program, in which it was mentioned that the custom duties and the sales taxes on the imported parts was 10 to 15% in India. Pakistan, because it does not have a technology base, so it is offering quite liberal incentives to the manufacturers so that they can kickstart some sort of manufacturing concerns here, so that an ecosystem can be developed. We have to wait and see that for how long these policies will last. Although it is mentioned that it's for 5 years, but there's a clause in policy framework that after 2 years the localization of parts will be reviewed, and it is expected that after 2 years some sort of policy tweaks might be implemented. So the way forward with this current policy framework is that, as we have mentioned in our previous case for economic case for the EVs, 2 and 3 wheelers certainly they present quite an economic window for the government to lessen their foreign exchange reserve costs and to make savings. So at the capital cost of, as we know that the capital cost of 2 and 3 wheelers is still quite high. So the government should give some sort of concessionary green financing facility of State Bank of Pakistan through partner banks, and this should be extended to the common consumers, just like in the case of solar PV. So that once, because the capital cost of EVs is so high, for the common consumers, it does not make an economic sense to purchase the EVs at a high cost and then wait for 5 to 10 years of the life cycle of EVs in order to get the payback. So the government should be extending the loan facilities through the State Bank, and something similar to the FAME subsidy framework of India could be introduced in Pakistan. Secondly, government should invest in the public-private partnership mode to introduce EV charging infrastructure, especially the cheaper level 2 chargers within cities, to alleviate the range and anxiety of consumers. It is a very valid concern among consumers, because if you buy a very expensive 2 or 3 wheeler, especially for those who are running it for commercial purposes, they do not want the charge to be finished right in the middle of their business activities. So the charging infrastructure has to be there, and the government needs to invest in the charging infrastructure through the help of the private sector. Thirdly, with the influx of a huge amount of electric vehicles, it is expected that the battery waste will cause a huge problem. So stringent battery recycling and disposal laws need to be formulated from now on to avoid environmental degradation and possible lack of following of the rules. So the rules need to be formulated and implemented right away instead of waiting for the later stage when the situation could get out of hands. So thank you very much. With this, I'll move on to the question answer session. We'll check if the participants have sent any questions. So first question is from Mr. Faisal Abbas. He is asking that how many electric charging stations are in Pakistan? If not present, when we will see them on ground? So currently, as per my knowledge, Go Petroleum has installed a few charging stations in Lahore. Uh, it it the charging stations were inaugurated last month. Moreover, BMW had a few charging stations installed in various upmarket places in Pakistan, such as Islamabad, in Karachi. However, those charging stations are again compatible only with BMW electric vehicles. So, as I mentioned in my suggestion in the previous slide, the government really needs to think of some framework to introduce the EV charging infrastructure. Otherwise, there will always be range anxiety in the consumers, and that will cause the consumers to move towards internal combustion engines as they are more reliable. So it's a chicken and egg problem. Should the electric vehicles come first or should the charging stations come first? But my view is that the charging stations need to be there in order to supplement the EV policy, which has been recently introduced. So without that, the higher penetration would be quite difficult. Second question is again from Mr. Faisal Abbas. He's saying that you're saying Pakistan will enjoy the reduction in import bill, but is there Pakistan able to recover the cost of EVs in terms of subsidies like India? So basically, uh, the government has to decide that how much of the savings it can reinvest in the form of subsidies. So it has to be a very rational and well calculated move. The government cannot announce all of a sudden any particular amount of money without first considering how much savings will actually be realized. So I gave a few scenarios. For example, in the case of 10,000, 100,000 conversion of motorbikes to electric motorbikes, there will be saving of around $11 million. So if the government thinks that in order to achieve the target of 100,000 bikes, it can invest some of its savings up to the maximum of 10 or 11 million dollars, then it's the prerogative of the government. But again, the overall there should be a well calculated move, and it should take into account the overall savings and the subsidy criteria. Mr. Naveed has mentioned that can you elaborate more in the impact on electricity demand? So as I mentioned earlier, I'll go back to the previous slide. So these all numbers have a linear relationship with each other. So for 30% conversion of electric bikes in Pakistan, which means a conversion of 5.25 million bikes, the additional power generation needed would be around 2000 gigawatt hour. But if the government chooses to not replace 30% motorbikes and instead goes for, let's say, 10,000 motorbikes, the overall power generation required would be 3 times less. So let's say for 100,000 bikes, the overall power generation requirement would be around 80 gigawatt hour. So in that case, you can clearly see that the total power generation or power production capacity of Pakistan is around 107,000 gigawatt hour. In actual, the gigawatt hours generated in Pakistan are around 140,000 gigawatt hour. But then we consider the transmission and line losses and other kinds of losses. So the power available for the consumers, the energy available for the consumers is around 107,000 or 110,000 gigawatt hour per year. So out of that, if we need to increase the power generation by only 1% or 2%, that is not a big deal. We have a lot of power plants which are currently under development. They will be commissioned soon. Secondly, you might have noticed a few months back, there was availability of LNG, there was huge availability of power, but there was not enough uptake. and because of that, the government had to pay capacity charges. So with the introduction of electric vehicles, the government can also reduce its spending on the capacity charges, because that electricity would be turned into a beneficial use. So this is the overall point of view from my side. Another question is from Mr. Faisal Abbas: what is our Ministry of Science doing in the progress of EVs? And report to PM delivered by MOCC, your comment. So as I mentioned earlier, that initially the Ministry of Climate Change initiated this effort and informed the government of having the need for EV policy. However, the interministerial committee formed by the government, which included the Ministry of Climate Change, Ministry of Industrial Production, and other government stakeholders. So that interministerial committee finally, with approval of all the ministries, put up this policy, and this policy has now been approved by the Economic Coordination Committee of the Cabinet. So because this has been approved now, so it stands as a legal policy, and what we have been hearing is that it has been presented with the consensus of all the ministries. However, we have been hearing some alternate point of views as well, but it's too early to voice out those opinions, and we will wait and see that how the policy actually progresses, and then we can form an opinion on these sort of news and rumors. So do we have any more questions from your side, ladies and gentlemen? Okay, so it seems that there are no more questions. Even if you have some more questions, and if you want to ask something later on, you can always email SAARC Energy Center. You can email me. My email address is given on the website, rfete@saarcenergy.org. I would like to thank everyone for attending today's session of the webinar. We listened to some excellent presentations delivered by our distinguished presenters from India. All these presentations will be made available on the SAARC Energy Center website. Furthermore, the recording of the session will also be made available through a YouTube link, and it will be shared with you on the website. If you have any questions or suggestions or comments, we would like you to please email us, share your comments with us, and we would certainly accommodate your topics of interest in our future webinars. With me signing out, thank you again for joining us today, and I look forward to see you again next time. Thank you so much.